Reaching the Champions League final is never an easy task for any team. And the journey Borussia Dortmund have had from the group stage, the so-called group of death with PSG, Milan, Newcastle, and then PSV, Atleti and PSG, they deserve to be in the Champions League final. And what do you think is their strengths going into the final?
Well, of course, I've seen a lot more of Real Madrid than I have of Dortmund, but I've seen a bit of them this season, saw them play against Atleti. I think their strengths are pretty clear. They're a team that they're well organised, they're quite solid, they've got pace out wide, and they've got a big guy up front who can cause you problems in Fulcrum. So yeah, you've got to watch those wingers. Ancelotti was talking about this yesterday, about Dortmund's strength in transition and being aware of that. They've got Jadon Sancho sort of building his career again after what happened at Manchester United. You've got Adeyemi, who's really pacey as well. They've got a lot of players who are just delighted to be there because, as I say, not even they would have expected to be there. They haven't had a great season domestically. They've had an incredible season in the Champions League. Like you say, no one expected them to even get out of the group. Arguably been underdogs at every stage, pretty much in every tie. How they got through against PSG, I do not know.
They hit the crossbar, I think, 6 times PSG. They can't do that against Real Madrid.
There was an element of luck there, yeah, of course. But look, they're there and they deserve to be there. We've seen someone like Hummels sort of rolling back the years as well in defence. So they have to be taken seriously. You cannot, even though it's Real Madrid in the Champions League, you can't take anything for granted. Yes, if Madrid are at their best, you would expect them to win. But you would have said the same about all of Dortmund's opponents so far, and yet here we are.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that they also have, say, 2 stories that fascinate me. One is obviously the story of Marco Reus, like his last game being the Champions League final, another German who's trying to go out on the top. But the fact that I was reading the stat that they're the lowest ranked team after Chelsea in 2012 and Liverpool in 2005 to reach the Champions League final according to the UEFA coefficient rankings. And the last 2 times this happened, Roberto Di Matteo's Chelsea won the Champions League.
Yeah, of course.
And Benitez Liverpool had the best Champions League final according to Liverpool fans. So there's a lot of positivity that you can think, and there's an underdog story, especially against Real Madrid, because Real Madrid are always favourites in a Champions League final.
Yeah, and it's a one-off game.
Yeah.
In a one-off game, anything can happen. Yes, Madrid are favourites, but if there's one note of caution, I'd say that if you look at Real Madrid in the Champions League, certainly in the knockout stage, they haven't always been at their best this season, and especially when you look at them against their record against kind of so-called underdogs in the Champions League isn't always the best. You almost want Madrid to be going up against the biggest and the best teams. It's like it brings out the best in them, doesn't it? But look at the Leipzig tie, for example, this season, to mention another German team, in which Leipzig outplayed Real Madrid and ended up going through. So there's a warning sign there, perhaps. I mean, you'd be surprised if Madrid didn't turn up, given that this is a final, and given that they tend to deliver. When was the last time Madrid lost? They just don't lose.
1981.
Yeah, there you go. It just doesn't happen. So it would be a huge shock. But like I say, there are 1 or 2 precedents there for Madrid underperforming against so-called underdog sides.
Definitely, and the fact that an underdog story over a 1 game, anything can happen, as you said. But how do you expect Dortmund to play now? They have fast wingers, a centre forward who's big, who can score. But do you expect them to attack Real Madrid, or do you expect them to, counter on the set piece situations, sit back, counter Real Madrid, because they have a lot of pace on both wings?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, that would be tempting, wouldn't it, from their point of view, to look to keep it tight and hit Madrid on the break. That makes sense as a game plan. What they won't want to do, I think, is to concede too much possession, too much of the ball and let Real Madrid play. Because if you do that over 90 minutes or maybe more, can Dortmund hold out against what Madrid have in terms of Vinicius and Bellingham and Rodrigo and Joselu and so on in terms of goal threat? You think about it really, what are Madrid's biggest weapons? Yeah, it's Vinicius and Rodrigo and their pace. It's Bellingham. So what can Dortmund do to neutralise them, I suppose, is the question. And yeah, that might well be looking to deny them space in behind, because we know that if Madrid get space in behind, with Vinicius Junior in particular, they can destroy you.
Definitely. Yeah, Vinicius gets that space. We saw what happens against Kimmich. Kimmich, probably one of the best players at that position, and he suffered against Vinicius Junior. Like, without any disrespect, he had a very, very difficult time against Vinny Junior. And how much support would Ryerson expect from Sancho, especially against, like, when you are like tackling Vinny Junior? He would also probably expect like a Mourinho-esque where a defensive midfielder comes in onto the wing, where Sabitzer has to take that role. How difficult? Like obviously Dortmund would be making their plans keeping Vinny in mind.
I think so. I mean, right now, if you're an opponent picking out one danger man for Real Madrid, it's Vinicius Junior. But like I say, the problem with that, the difficulty, is that he's added this versatility to his game. So whereas in the past, stopping Vinicius Junior, yes, it was a job for the fullback. Is it anymore, or is it about the centre backs? Because the kind of movements we're looking at him making this season is often been from more central positions, and we've seen more flexibility from Rodrigo as well, where it used to be Vinny on the left, Rodrigo on the right. We've seen it in key moments this season. Ancelotti's been switching that up, playing Rodrigo on the left, looking to surprise opponents, and putting Vinicius through the middle. And that's without even mentioning Bellingham. So there's so much variety now to Real Madrid's attacking game and to Vinicius' attacking game. I think that's been a big part of that. Has been because I think there was an element in the past of Vinicius' game being predictable. That's not to say it was easy to stop, but maybe it was to a certain extent predictable. That's not the case anymore, and that makes it even more of a headache for Dortmund.
But talking about the final in Dortmund, the coach Terzic, he has a dream story. Like he was in the stands when they won the Bundesliga in 2012. He's been there at the youth team as a scout under Klopp, and then he almost won them the Bundesliga last year. I think he won the German Cup in 2021 with them. Now it's a Champions League final. What kind of a journey has it been for him?
Yeah, well, you talk about the underdog story of Dortmund. That's reflected in the coach, isn't it? Really, because he's sort of an underdog coach in a way. He's a coach that no one's ever really been talking about as being an up and coming coach, a coach to watch. He's been sort of drafted in by Dortmund. I mean, almost on an emergency basis, right? When he's come in, it's sort of fallen into place for him to be in charge of Dortmund when he's been in charge there, more than it being some sort of plan. I bet he cannot believe that he's where he is right now, which is going up against Carlo Ancelotti in a Champions League final. But no, look, I mean, all credit to him. He's done everything that could have been asked of him this season in Europe. Yes, domestically it's been a bit more of a struggle, but this is the ultimate test. Going up against Ancelotti and Madrid in a Champions League final. Whatever happens, this is a huge achievement. And yeah, it has, as you say, particular personal significance for him with his story and his connection to this club. So yeah, it's a wild card. It's another name that we didn't expect to see associated with the Champions League final, but huge credit to him that he's got them there.
Yeah, huge credit to him, and he would be all guns raring, in a Champions League final. Probably a club like Dortmund, who's been in a Champions League final once a decade, 97, 2013.
Yeah.
It's like probably the biggest game of the season for all these players, like probably biggest game of their lives. They might never be in a Champions League final again. On the other hand, there's Real Madrid. 6 times in the last 10 years. They're dominating the Champions League in Gen Z technology like a farmer's league. That's what they're doing. 6 times in 10 years is a lot. And Carlo Ancelotti is there year after year. Real Madrid there year after year. But talking about the final, a player, whenever he plays, Real Madrid win. That's the stat. He hasn't lost a game this season whenever he has started. Tchouaméni, he's injured. I think he's very crucial, especially winning off all the first balls and the aerial game that happens, taking the ball and passing it to Kroos and Modric or Fede Valverde, distributing it all around. Do you think his absence is going to make a difference and could be an advantage for Dortmund, or Real Madrid have the players?
Yeah, he's an interesting one, Tchouaméni, because I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like there's still a bit of a division among Real Madrid fans about being completely convinced by him. There are aspects of his game that you look at and think, is he quite good enough on the ball? I like him a lot as a player, but you hear people making that argument. Ancelotti really likes him a lot because he tends to pick him when he's available, whether it's in midfield or filling in this season at centre-back. As you say, he adds a lot as well, aerially, both defensively and chips in with the odd goal. I think his absence is a blow. Madrid have tended to play this season with sort of a double pivot in midfield, and so it raises the question, who are those two if Tchouaméni isn't there? I think the most likely scenario, we saw Ancelotti pretty much use Madrid's last league game of the season against Betis as a dress rehearsal for the Champions League final. And that 11 we expect to see in the Champions League final. So that means Kroos, and it means Camavinga alongside him. You've got Fede Valverde in there as well in terms of the midfield. So yes, Tchouaméni's a blow, but he's not a guaranteed starter for Madrid, is he necessarily? He probably would have started if he was available. but it's basically Cross plus one, isn't it? I think it's Cross plus Camavinga, and then Valverde drifting to the right, Bellingham drifting to the left maybe, and then the front two.
Yeah, and the fact that the lineup we saw against Betis is probably, I think, the lineup that will be playing in the Champions League final. And the very fact that Dortmund also, I feel, will be playing with the same starting 11, apart from, I feel, because the coach already said that Marco Reus is going to start and be the captain in the Champions League final, and Julian Brandt is going to miss out, probably start on the bench. He hasn't said, but that's the same position for both of the players. Who do you think will be the key players that could cause damage to Real Madrid in the final?
It's a good question. I mean, you mentioned Reus, what a story that would be. I know that he's not the player that he was a few years ago before injuries sort of robbed him of some of that kind of electric pace that he had. Otherwise, I look at this Dortmund team and it's not. Look, maybe I'll live to regret saying this, but I don't look at it as a team full of danger men per se, if not kind of an impressive collective. I mean, you've mentioned players like Sabitzer, who on his day is a very, very good player, but hasn't always been consistent. We've talked about the pace of players out wide like Sancho and Adeyemi, but I mean, I'd say key men for them are more like the likes of Hummels at the back, not a danger man per se, but sort of a key man. Yeah. So I'd say for Dortmund, it's more about the collective than picking out individuals. I think that's my impression anyway.
Yeah, and in the end, it's a team that's going to win a Champions League final because of individual performances. And Hummels has been key. Had like an error against Atleti, but managed it out, and then scored against PSG in the semi-final. But thank you, Alex, for doing this. And before you go, we'll ask you your predictions for the Champions League final.
I mean, I think Real Madrid will win. It comes as no surprise to say that. I don't think it'll be a heavy win, but I think they will be the better side. I could see them scoring 2 or 3 goals. I'll go for a 3-1 Real Madrid win.
And goal scorers?
Well, let's say Jude, shall we? Bellingham on the score sheet. It would be a lovely way to end the season for him. Vinicius Junior on the score sheet as well. The third goal scorer, I'll leave it open. I'm not sure. There's a lot. There's a few candidates. You could see Rodrigo. You could see Joselu if he comes off the bench. You could see in the latter stages when the game opens up a bit more. You could see someone like Brahim Diaz coming off the bench and scoring. But Jude and Vini, I'm not really sticking my neck out there to say that if anyone's going to score for Madrid, that it's most likely, I think, to be those two.
Definitely, Jude and Vini to score. Party at Cibeles, party outside the Bernabeu. That's the dream for Saturday. Thank you so much, Alex Kirkland, for joining us and doing this preview. This is the first time we've actually done a full-fledged preview with a journalist. We did spoke to a few, but it was not like a preview, and we'll always remember this moment. And thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, that's very kind, man. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. All the best.